Welcome to First in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write great fiction. I'm your host, Aaron Gansky, author of the Hand of Adonai series, The Bargain, and First in Fiction.
And I'm Alton Gansky from Central California, writer of fiction and nonfiction, director of the Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference, and probably something else too.
We have a lot of hats. I think between the two of us, what do we have, like 27 different hats that we wear?
Yeah, and the last 2 days have been that. I interviewed T. Davis Bunn yesterday and Cindy Sproles today, and of course there's all the editing that goes with that. And I was out of town for a few days, which was very nice. Did a series of interviews for my new book, in-studio interviews. That was fun. But the problem is, every time I leave, there's a ton of work that comes back, so waiting for me, perched like a vulture.
That's the thing about work, like it just doesn't give up. You know, it's tenacious at work. Like that inbox just it doesn't quit.
Yeah, I did my best to keep up with all the email, but with the conference and the new book and stuff like that, and a couple of projects, it just went nuts. So,
well, the good problems to have, right?
Yeah, it beats sitting around watching soap operas. So,
you know, I was talking with Cindy Sproles. We had her on a couple weeks ago, and you've just interviewed her, and I guess Amazon has sold out of her book. So, yeah, that's
a fact. She didn't mention that. Really?
Yeah. Amazon had sold out of her book, and so she was saying, you know, you can find them at these different places, and I guess that's a real good problem to have. I do notice. In your background, you've got a book perched above your left shoulder there. It's got some pretty fancy artwork there. I'm having a little bit of trouble reading the title, though. What book is that?
Well, it's a book called The Bargain, and we've been having trouble with mice and stuff, so I thought maybe we could frighten them off. No, that's your book. I've had mine up there for a couple of times. I thought, hey, I'm just going to switch this around, so...
I wish I could just kind of zoom in on it, just pinch and zoom, and just let that take up the whole screen. That'd be fantastic. So
you can pinch all you want, but I don't know if it's going to help you zoom.
Pinch all you want. It's like a zit. Pinch all you want. I don't know if we need that that particular metaphor there, or simile.
Edit.
Edit. I know. We should probably get to work here. Thank you guys for joining us. Appreciate having you along. As is our custom, we start off with our publishing term for this week. And so, Pops, you got a style sheet today?
We do. I was going to do a different one that came out of another conversation, but as I was planning for tonight, I thought this might be a great one to deal with. A thing called a style sheet. Normally it's written as 2 words, but I have seen it done as a single word, compound word. A style sheet, well, there's 2 types of style sheets to think about. Publications, from magazines to book publishers, have a style sheet. What that style sheet is, how do they handle certain things? A lot of it has to do with some of the grammar and things. But for a writer, I found it very useful to create your own style sheet, partly to influence your publisher, but they will ultimately go with theirs in most cases, though they will yield to author preferences at times. And a style sheet is simply a document that you create that covers all the basic things in your book: character names, places, transportation, specialized vehicles, specialty terms, abbreviations. You know, if you're doing a medical novel, for example, there'll be a lot of technical terms you have to deal with, and you list all of those. It becomes a good source for you, too, to make sure that you're using the same names, the same descriptions, the same terms throughout, and it'll save you a ton of time. So what I've done in the past is I've just set up the document as I'm writing. If I come across a special term, I switch over to that document and I add it to my style sheet, and then I have it right at hand, and it kind of goes in hand in hand with what we're talking about. I was trying to figure out whether or not I can get it to show up on screen here.
If you can do your screen share?
Yeah, I could try that if you want.
Yeah, it wouldn't do much for our audio listeners, but we can all describe it in great detail.
You want me to give that a try?
Sure, go for it. While you're doing that, I'll just mention that I've just went through this process of creating a style sheet with Bethany Kazmarek, my editor, and she asked me questions I hadn't considered before Um, and these are kind of gray areas sometimes. Obviously, your publisher is going to have a particular style sheet, like you said. They're going to subscribe to the Chicago Manual of Style, let's say, and they're going to want certain punctuation done a certain way. But there are some kind of gray areas, especially as our language changes and evolves, and some of the rules aren't so rulish anymore. One of the interesting questions she asked me was if I preferred already or already. And we eventually came to the conclusion that if it was in prose, it would be already, and if it were in dialogue, it would be already, one word. You know, it depends on how it's being used in that case. And so, again, for the sake of consistency, that's what we're looking for. Looks like you got it up there, Pops.
Let's see if I can make it bigger. Did it make it a little bit bigger there? And let's see here. Let's go with maybe something like that. Does that work?
Yeah. But the
All
minute
right.
I talk, it clicks back over to me. So I'll click over to you and make it stay on you. There we go.
Alrighty. Well, you're right that they're going to have their own style sheet. And in book publishing, it's usually the Chicago Manual of Style will be the overarching document that they'll use, but they'll have a personalized style sheet. For example, since I do so much stuff writing like church history and the like, one of the questions is, do you capitalize the personal pronoun of deity? When you're talking referring to God, do you use capital H when you say He, or do you use lowercase? It's called the down style and up style is the term they use, and it will vary from publisher to publisher. And so they'll also have special things that they will want to see in their book. So you leave that for the copy editor. You do your best. You give them something nice and clean, and then go from there. Because the copy editor's job is to make it conform, and just know that there'll probably be some changes that go on. This is for my book Wounds, and it's just the style sheet I use. That was my last novel, and the beginning portion of it is just my name, the information about the book. It's Wounds. It's a suspense thriller. It's about 93,000 words, third-person, multi-point of view, 3-act structure, and done in the past tense. Though in this particular book, there was some present tense in the part of the epilogue, but that's was a variant. And so I list acknowledgments. I wasn't using any acknowledgments, excuse me, for this particular book, and so I have some information about how I like to handle things. But most of all, for what we're talking about tonight, I maintain a list of characters. And so I have the main characters, Dr. Ellis Poe, Ph.D., Detective Carmen Raimondi from the San Diego Police Department, and so on. There are some that are related to Poe because he's a seminary professor, so I have seminary-related here. And then there are murder-related ones because I kill off just a lot of people in this thing. So I have to keep track of who was murdered and make sure their names work out, and then police-related victims, and so on. You're going to ask a question there?
Yeah, well, yeah, I noticed you have here that Naomi is listed as the wife, and she doesn't die, does she? Because
no.
I have a problem
Excuse
with
me.
wives named Naomi dying. I'm not okay with that.
You'll have to tell me why that is sometime, but no, not to give too much of the story away, a body was found in Rabbi Joel Singer's yard. And when you go through the book, there's a reason why it has to be his yard, and when you look at the other murders, they all tie together. It's because it's about a serial killer with a biblical bent, and but they're the ones that find it. So that's why that's there. So these are just very easy to put together, and then I got to where I would send them to the publisher when I'd send in my manuscript. Key vehicles, if there's a 1985 Camaro, because I was forever going through, and I would put a character in a car, and then I thought, well, wait a minute, which car was that? And then I'd have to go back and search for it. So I found it just much easier to make a list. I just tied it into the style sheet. We'll be talking about a little different way of doing this, but you get some of the idea here anyway. Other vehicles, San Diego Police helicopter, the Able, airborne law enforcement. Lots of acronyms and initialisms in. I just thought that'd be a good publishing term. The difference between an acronym and an initialism. But some of those terms keep popping up, and then places where all these events happen, various locations that are scenes, and special terms. Luminol is used to find blood, traces of blood, and those sorts of things. So, and then I get into a little grammar and stuff, which is beyond what we're talking about tonight, but this is how I use numbers and time and some grammar and punctuation things that I like to ask for. I don't always get it, but there's just certain things I like.
Right. Right. Excellent. Well, very cool. And that, like you say, that bridges us directly into what we're talking about tonight, which is binders. I guess I should click over to me so people can see me. Binders, research binders for our project-specific binders that will contain things like our style sheet. And what we're talking about here is keeping track of all that wonderful research that we do, having it in an easy-to-find location, and just for quick reference, it's also something that we can keep adding to. It's, I think, something that's very valuable, especially when you hit writer's block, to go back through and kind of look again at your characters and things of that nature. And there are a couple different ways to handle this. Depending on your personality type, you might be a little more old school and like kind of the three-ring binder approach, or maybe you are, more of the millennial. You're in the digital age here, and you like the computer. You like having everything saved in the cloud, etc. So, a couple ways to handle that. And Pops, why don't you just real quick take us through your process for creating this? What kinds of things do you include? Why do you include them? And how do you assemble these things for your projects?
I usually do it the digital way because I'm just that much of a geek. But I've seen many, including the best-selling author Terry Blackstock. She does a very analog way. By that I mean she's not using her computer and stuff to keep track of this. She uses a three-ring binder, and she divides it up into housing. So if you open her three-ring binder, you would see floor plans that she clipped out of magazines, external scenes, pictures of small houses, large houses, office buildings, whatever might occur in her book. And so that gives her a visual reference. You could just run to those. Same thing with characters. You can take photos, and this is where the digital becomes a little easier, but you can download photos offline and use them as reminders. There's been several books where I've used certain actors. Now, if you were to read it, you would know that's the actor I'm thinking of. But it helps me keep track of that, and that way I can remember if the person has black hair or brown hair. Do they have a rugged look? For the main characters, that's usually not a problem, but it's your supporting cast. It's repeating small characters. You have a hotel that they're in, and there's somebody, the maid who cleans the room. She may appear 3 or 4 times through the story. Well, you got to keep that straight. And so that's what you want. So the analog way is just you write it down, you put it in a 3-ring binder or some other kind of notebook. The digital way is you're using your computer, and one of the advantages to that is if it's all linked, if you're using a document, for example, on the cloud, you can add to it from no matter where you are using your phone or iPad or similar device. And there's several programs you can use. We can talk about that later if you want.
Mm-hmm.
So, excuse me just a sec. Never eat right before you podcast, apparently.
I never do.
I did this time. So one of the things you want to get down is the stuff you're likely to forget. And then some of this will be research. I did a book that took place in Antarctica, so I had to do a ton of research. And so I created a big file of everything about Antarctica, the problems people face when they're down there. Because of the altitude, you get towards the center of that, it's like a mile high or something. So there was so much information, I had to put it into a book and keep that handy so I could go back and double check myself on those. So each book will be a little different. If you're doing some stuff with history, you're going to have that in there. If you have somebody who is a clothes horse, and always wearing fancy clothes. We got to keep track of what they wear so you don't repeat, those sorts of things. And then for guys like us, I first time I had a female protagonist, I didn't know how to dress her. I know nothing about women's clothing.
You know, can I tell you? Can I tell the story, Pops?
Yeah, you go ahead. Tell the story.
This happened when I was still living at home. I think I was still in high school at the time, and I walked into your office to talk to you about something, and you've got all these catalogs spread out across your desk with open to pictures of all these women and women's clothing catalogs, and I kind of looked at you. Pops, do we need to have a talk? You know, what's going on in your life right now that this is what we're looking at?
I believe the exact words were, Pops, do you have something you want to tell me?
That's what it was.
I didn't know, and the women who were watching, and those later they'll be listening and stuff, yeah, I didn't know what a shell top was. It's a top that women wear, and it just sounded painful to me. But by getting these catalogs out, I was able to go through and use the right terms, and then I had a couple of women go over it too to make sure, because you know, I have dress shoes, I have running shoes, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And slippers, you know, and they have mules and slingbacks and spectator pumps, and you know, it was just a whole different world for me. I was lost, and so I had to be. Your mom took me into the lodge and taught me some of these things.
Now, the shell tops, though, that's pretty self-explanatory, isn't it? That's what the Little Mermaid wears, shell top.
Well, that may have been where it originated, but no.
Not so much. Okay.
Well, hey, listen, you haven't lived until your wife walks you into a woman's shoe store and starts pointing out in front of everybody these different shoes. Now, these are spectator pumps, and everybody's looking at you like, I don't think they make a size 14.
That's a lot of fun. That's the great thing about being a writer is you can research pretty much whatever you want, and you just say, I'm a writer, and all of a sudden it's okay. It's fine, you know? So fantastic. Yeah. So research is key, and that's all kind of stuff. Now, in a situation like that, that's probably something that you want to do kind of old school with the binder. Maybe you're clipping out some of those pictures of the fashion, if this character's a real fashionista or whatever they call people who care about clothes, because as you can tell by the podcast, those of you watching the video, I'm not one who cares about clothes. I'm lucky to get myself dressed in the morning. So maybe you cut some of those out and you put those maybe in your binder, maybe your 3-ring binder for easy access and reference. Is that kind of how you do that?
Yeah, and I think what it comes down to is what you're using for your source material. If you're clipping from magazines, and magazines are great for this stuff, but if you're clipping from magazines, then you're going to be putting it in a 3-ring binder or a file. That doesn't really matter, but you're using paper. If you're getting most of your information off the internet, then you'll probably want to store it digitally because it's just much easier to do. And the internet, of course, is where you're going to get a ton of information.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, God bless Google. That's my first and last stop. And if it's not on Google, then it doesn't exist, clearly. But you do have to be careful because you cannot believe everything that you read on the internet. Abraham Lincoln said that, I believe. I think I found that out online. So, but you do want to be careful of that. So other things that you might include in your digital binder, we've got some character references here, some pictures, some descriptions, maybe your author style sheet, research, and again, old school research where you're finding, maybe making photocopies of things from an encyclopedia if there's something that you need to research, or clipping from magazines like you suggested. Is there anything else that you might include in a 3-ring binder kind of a research thing?
Well, any research, of course, just again, it's going to vary from genre to genre. Some books require tons and tons of research. Others, not so much. If you're doing a cozy mystery and you're familiar with the town that it takes place in, there's not a great deal. But if you're introducing a weapon, for example, and I used to have to do this all the time, I had to look up the weapons that were used, are going to be used in the book, and then you have to start. You just want to make silly mistakes like having too many bullets in a revolver. Took 18 shots out of a 6-round revolver.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to make that kind of a mistake. So you do that kind of research. Well, that's the kind of stuff that you store, and from that process, sometimes you get new ideas about how to handle a scene. So I have the characters, places. And there's a lot of things you can use there. Maps will help you. If you're doing the paper route, you can use just regular maps. I used to use the old Thomas guide a long time ago. Particular buildings that are of interest. It doesn't have to. You don't have to use their city. You can put that building anywhere you want. Transportation vehicles, especially if they're rather unique, and then some of those specialty terms. But then on the digital side, you have the advantages, you say, of using using Google. And one of my favorites is Google Maps. So, for example, in the Book of Wounds, I have to go to all these different places in San Diego. I've not lived there for a long time, so I wanted to look at how things had changed. I go to Google Maps. I use the Street View, and there's one particular scene there that's near a particular beachfront area, and it has a little man figure. You put it there, and you can scan 360 degrees. So I could look at the park where the body was found. I could turn around and look at the street, so I knew if it was one lane or two lanes, and then I looked at the houses. And one of the houses on that street ended up in the book. And it stood out from the other houses, so I knew I was on target doing that. So you can use Google for maps. Another thing digitally that you can do is you can set up Google Alerts. If you're researching a particular a topic, maybe something in Washington, D.C., and every time something happens there you want to know about it, Google Alerts will send you an email. So whatever you're researching, whatever topic, it will come back to you without you doing anything. You just set it up once, and whatever the topic is, it will come to you. Google Books is another one. It's books.google.com. Books.google.com. You can see inside a great many books, not all of them, but you can see inside them and get all kinds of information from that. And of course, you can get news. So there's a lot just from the Google side of things.
And if we stick with that idea of Google, I'm going to throw out there Google Chrome. I'm not sure what web browsers you use, but Chrome, the nice thing about it is it saves across all your devices. So you bookmark something on your laptop, and then later on you want to check something on your phone, you pull up Google Chrome on your phone. As long as you're logged in with your same Google account, it's got all your bookmarks there. It remembers what tabs you had open when last you were logged in. It's got all that great stuff. And so what I would suggest maybe is creating a folder of bookmarks for your particular projects. I've got one that's kind of generic writing bookmarks that I frequent, things like baby names, popular baby names by year. So I can go through, and when I'm naming my characters, I find the top 50 names, female names for girls born in 2001 or whatever, and that information's there. It's at my fingertips, and I can look that up, and I can find something that sounds familiar but not so familiar it's just kind of cliche, I guess. Some more interesting types of names. Do the same thing with surnames. That's something that's going to go across projects. Doesn't matter what I'm working on, I can always go back there. Random name generators for fantasy games. To kind of come up with some names for my fantasy worlds that I'm doing in the Hand of Adonai series. That's something that I do over multiple books, so that's in there. But I've also got project-specific ones for the Implausibles that I'm working on, which takes place in a mental institution. I've got architectural designs of hospitals, mental health facilities, that are labeled, and it's got the schematic drawings, and it's got here's the mechanical, and here's the MRI machine, and here's this and that, and so it's got all that for me, so I can come back to it easily, pretty much on any device that I want, as long as it's bookmarked. But I do end up saving a lot of that and kind of importing it into my own digital research binder. Pops, do you think we're at that point where we should jump in and start talking about digital research binders and how we assemble those? Or
yeah, we could do that, and we should do that. There are several programs that you can use, and Microsoft is making one of them free now.
Ooh.
And that's Notebook. Let me just double check here. Hopefully this won't knock me offline here.
If it does, I'll do some sort of song and dance to entertain the troops while you're
OneNote.
gone.
Yeah, OneNote is what I'm looking for here.
Okay, OneNote, yeah.
OneNote is just really, really good. And I work on an Apple, and it will work on my phone, my Apple computer, my iPad, even though it's a Microsoft product. And it's, in essence, what it is like a big 3-ring binder, but you can even put other projects in. You could have 5 books going, and 3 articles and whatever else it is that you're writing, and have separate tabs for them with pages in each of those tabs, and it's free. If you want to use the other Microsoft products, I think that it's $100 a year or something. But that one is free, and it's very good place to keep research. The other is, and I think you use this product, don't you, Scrivener?
I do, yeah. I was actually going to do a screen share and kind of walk through that one in a little bit, but
Okay.
I don't. Are there any other programs that you recommend before I get to Scrivener?
Well, I've used everything from PowerPoint for characters. I
Yeah.
put their picture in and all their basic information, and then when I sit down to write, I would call up my document. I'd call it PowerPoint so I could see them, and you can shuffle those like cards. So that worked out well for me. Some of the newer computers, and I can only speak for Apple on this one, they also have a program that are like sticky notes. They call them stickies,
Yeah.
and you can fill up your whole desktop with little notes, and you can move them around. There's others that you can use that are like 3x5 cards if you want, which Scrivener has incorporated.
Hmm.
So there's really a whole bunch of things you can use to organize information. But Evernote is another one that's kind of like OneNote. Evernote is free, and you can use that on any device. And once you have Evernote set up, you can just start funneling information in. The only problems you'll have is if you find something in a book, a physical book, and you want to save it, you will have to either type it out or take a photo of it, scan it, whatever, to put it in there. So it's not unusual to have 2 sources, a paper one and a digital one, but most of the time you can get by with just the digital.
Yeah, and Evernote is one I hear people rave about Evernote. I've not actually used it, so I can't walk anybody through it or say much about it. But if you're listening and you're a huge Evernote apologist and you want to defend the merits of Evernote and maybe let us know how you use it, we'd love to hear some comments from you. Maybe on Facebook or on my website, whatever the case may be, or even just on YouTube would be fine as well. Wherever you find us, comments are good. So
Yeah, Evernote is deeply loved by some writers. And the other place you can do is if you're just taking documents, you want to keep all the documents in one place, Dropbox is good for that. So whatever you copy, whatever document you make, you can put into Dropbox. So where Evernote is, you're going to copy and put it into Evernote, or Dropbox is you're just going to be plunking things down in there, and it just saves all of them.
I really like Dropbox. I highly encourage cloud storage as much as humanly possible. It's just good in case your computer dies. It's good to have something backed up. And what's great about Dropbox is you can install it on your computer, and it's just like an extra folder. It just happens to sync a lot. The cool thing about that is within your folders, whether it's PC or Mac, you can create new folders. If you don't like the analog kind of the old school 3-ring binder approach, you want to do it digitally, but you don't have any of these programs that we're talking about, just make use of your file management resources and create a folder for characters. And in that folder, you're going to have all your perhaps Word documents or word processing pages where you've got all the information about your characters with a little picture on them, or maybe it's a PowerPoint like you said. Maybe you've got one about an outline where you've got an extensive outline and some additional resources, maybe a timeline or something like that. Whatever the case may be. But having that folder structure intact is going to help you easily access whatever research you need to have when you need it. And so that's a good way to do it. And cloud storage is, I think, the way to go. I would be terrified if I didn't have everything saved in the cloud with redundancies left and right.
Yeah.
For too many horror stories.
But let's just back up just a little bit and say this. You really don't have to mess with all of those if you don't like that kind of stuff. They have things that will be very helpful to you, those programs. But you could just open a Word document or Pages, depending what you're using for your word processor, and start a document and just start unloading this stuff in it. And then you can use the search function to find what you're looking for. So you don't have to do all of those things. I just like things in order. I like columns and rows, and I like to see pictures and stuff like that. It's easier for me the way my brain is wired. But if you don't, I've been that simple. I've done it that simply. I just used Word and just thrown stuff in it.
Yeah, absolutely. We are technophiles, though. I mean, we do like our tech.
Yeah, that is probably too much. Good thing I'm not rich.
I couldn't buy it honestly, Pops. It's your fault. So I'll send you a bill for all my technical things that I buy, all my technology. So, but yeah, you don't have to be super, advanced in your organizational skills. As long as you have it someplace that you can easily find it and reference it, it's good. The process of building one of these, by the way, is super powerful. For world building, for establishing things. For example, in my Hand of Adonai series, I'm on book 4 now, and there's stuff that happened in book 1, and I don't remember what happened in book 1, and I have to go back and double check. And rather than having to open up this other file and kind of search and find and hope that my memory serves me well enough to remember the exact phrasing of what I said to try and find the proper area. I'm using Scrivener now, and so what I learned early on is when I put something as I'm writing, I'm a discovery writer, so I don't know everything going into my project. And as I'm writing, if I say something, this particular herb heals this particular wound, I'm going to go ahead and record that in my research binder to kind of help build my story world. I thought I might show you a little bit how I do that with Scrivener. So let me see if I can get this set up here. I think I'm going to go get kind of crazy here.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, I'll say that Scrivener is a great product, and more writers are using it. If you're not familiar with it, what Scrivener is it's a dedicated writer's program. It's more than a word processor. It's a tool that allows you to save research. It's a tool that allows you to outline scenes, let's say, as we're seeing right there, as Aaron has brought up, which is probably focused on me now, but we'll switch back over to you in a second. And they look like 3x5 cards. Yeah.
It should still be on me. I think I have it. If you're seeing it, it should be on me.
All right. And so you see those 3x5 cards. It's a great program for very little money. I forget what it is. It's $30 or something like that.
It's really affordable. It's less than 100. I want to say. I feel like you're right. It's like $30-$35, something like that. So
yeah. Well, go ahead and do the walkthrough, and I'll check that out. I'll check out the price.
Well, here's what's really neat about it. As you're seeing here, I've got 3x5 cards. So I'm currently over here. If you'll see on the left-hand side, I'm not sure how well you can see it. I'm currently in my Snowflake folder here, or rather my research folder here. And under my Snowflake, I've got a research folder. So you can see my binders over here. That it's kind of set up like a file structure like you'd see in Microsoft Windows. You've got the big folder here, and then I can, if I want to, I can click and drag and move this over here. So I can reorder my scenes however I see fit. That becomes much more valuable when I'm looking at Chapter 1. And as you can see here, these are color-coded by point of view. So I can, take this and move this here, move it pretty much wherever I want, rather than having to copy and paste entire scenes in Microsoft Word. Here I just click and drag, and that's nice. So you can see here I've got a quick summary of what I want to do. I've got some scripture here that I've included that's going to become relevant. trying to avoid spoiler alerts here. But within my research, you see there's a world called Marasa, which has tribes and clans, and so I want to keep all their names straight and where they're from. These abominations, flora and fauna. So anything about, you know, the... Oh, is this empty now? I apparently haven't imported this one into book 4. That's embarrassing. But I do have some of this. So, like, you know, tree names and plant names go in here. What kind of animals and their descriptions and the monsters that they faced, etc. Geographic formations. All of these types of things. Epigrams, cities, timeline. The timeline for my world, I had to sit there and figure out something that was going to, you know, so I could refer back to and keep the kind of the history straight in my mind. Characters, as you can see here, I've got several different characters. The cast has expanded quite a bit since book 1, but I've got here, you know, a picture and some information here about each character. I'm not going to show you too much because, again, no spoilers. So we got all that good stuff there. Front matter, prologue, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see kind of how I've got this set up in such a way that it's super easy to find what I need, and I can click and drag things into here. Each, if I want to create a new scene or a reference guide, I can just do a new text, and then if I, you know, come in here, I can actually give a description of what the summary is. You know, the summary is a summary, and if I open that up, then it's got text of what's going on here. So there's that. Some really neat stuff. Scrivener is a good friend. It's I save everything in the cloud, so I can open it on any of my devices, save for mobile devices. I don't think they have a mobile app, which is fine because I don't know that I'd be able to type efficiently on my phone anyhow. So those are some benefits of Scrivener. In context of their research binder, we go through the tutorial. It's pretty easy to learn, and it's very easy to kind of keep things straight in that regard. So that's what I use, and that's what I like, and you don't have to do it that way, but it's definitely, I think, beneficial.
Yeah, there are a number of ways of doing this, and they may have noticed that there's a research section down there too, and you can click on that, and then you'll be able to add research elements, just like you had chapter 1, chapter 2, and the document. You could have different kinds of research put in there, and I believe the thing is going for $40 now.
40. I think they've upped the price, but man, I would have paid a lot more for this program. I'm that pleased with it. Really happy with it. So I would
10
definitely.
years ago, you'd have paid $400 for it. So it's that powerful.
And there are several programs, writing programs out there that you can get that do similar things as Scrivener, but they cost 10 times as much, like you say, or you know, at least 5 times as much, anywhere from you know, $200 to $400. I've seen some of these things selling for. They have a few more bells and whistles, but I'm not sure that it really needs much. The thing about Scrivener is if you know what you're writing, it's great. If you need a program that's going to help you come up with ideas and take you through some, you know, walk you through some questions to ask yourself, etc., a lot of that's you're going to have to do on your own with Scrivener. It doesn't do that for you. There's Dramatica will do that for you, but again, I think that's $150 to $200, and it has a number of research features the Dramatica does, but for my purposes and what we're talking about tonight, I think Scrivener is a fantastic tool. Not necessary. You don't have to have it. You can still save things like we talked about. I remember my first book outline was done in Microsoft Excel, and I did it by column, and so I had it by you know, the character's point of view, short scene description, page counts, you know, characters that were on scene, and you know, time of day, etc., to kind of help keep me on track. And that was a pretty powerful tool for me to get through book 1. As a discovery writer, I needed some sort of through line, and that really kind of helped provide that for me.
Yeah, I've done that. I've used Excel for exactly that, keeping track of the scenes and orders and stuff. You couldn't shift them around in your manuscript that way, but at least you could keep the order. You can keep some of the information. And we're not trying to turn this into an advertisement for Scrivener. It is just an amazing product, worth far more than what they're charging, and more writers are going to it. So, and they also have great support. They have videos to teach you how to use it. Now, it is, I believe, a British product, and so when you look at the dollar amount, make sure it has a dollar sign and not a pound sign in front of it, or a euro sign in front of it. But the other thing I was going to say about that, that's I just lost it. Anyway, it'll come back to me in just a second. But it's worth looking at. It's not a requirement. A lot of writers don't use it. But for organization and writing, all in the same program, it really is the way to go. And now I remember what I was going to say. The website is Literature and Latte, or like the coffee you drink.
Latte or latte?
Or latte. I put the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Lottie? Is it latte?
It's a latte, yeah. Best thing to do is just search for Scrivener, and that's with a V, Scrivener, and it'll take you there.
Yeah,
they have other
absolutely.
products too, so I think that's why they use a different web address.
I think we need to contact Scrivener about sponsoring our podcast, and I think that would be fantastic. So that's what we'll need to do. I'm going to put you in charge of that, Pops.
I need more. Thank you. Yes, I really need more.
Well, let's be realistic. I'm wearing 14 of our 27 hats. You only have 13, so let's pick up the pace. Okay. Time to pull your weight there.
Yeah, but mine are bigger hats.
It's because you have a bigger head. Oh! You see how I did that?
And nobody's coming to my defense here.
That was very punny. So, Molly Jo is asking. She popped in a little bit late. She's got a full plate. Talking about full plates. She popped in. She says, "I'm late to this party," but then she asks, "Has anybody talked about Storymill?" And the answer to that question, Molly Jo, is no. We haven't talked about Storymill because until you mention it right now, I had not heard of it. So, have you heard of it, Pops? Have you used it?
No, I've not used it. I think I've heard of it. There's many of them out there, but I went with the one I thought was getting the most traction. And for Scrivener, I like the idea, and we haven't said this clearly, that you can shuffle things around. So when Aaron had those cards up there for his chapters, if he decided that Chapter 5 needed to be Chapter 2, all he had to do is drag that over, and it changes it in the manuscript. You don't have to cut and paste. You just move that card, and it does all of that work for you. So that alone to me was worth $40.
Yeah, you do. It is a little bit tricky in the fact that when you write in Scrivener, you do have to export it to something like a Microsoft Word format because not everybody has Scrivener, and so that can get a little bit inflated with the kind of the back end and how it saves the files and the documents, etc. But on the compilation, how you compile it into a document, a single document, can be a little tricky. It's not that tough, but it does. There's a small learning curve on it, but I think it's worthwhile. You can also, I'm not going to say more. It's good.
Here's the bottom line of it, though, Aaron. The bottom line of it is whatever you use, you want to be able to access the information quickly, and if you're going to use it for writing too, not just keeping a book like we've been talking about, a personal reference book, if you want the kind of software that does both of those, that's great, but you just need to know that you have to be able to get it into a Word document. So it's usually an export function to do that. And it's very easy, but just make sure that you can do that. And if you can do that, it doesn't really matter what you use. Publisher will never ask you on what kind of software did you write this wonderful work of yours. All they care about is did you send it in Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
That's all they're going to care about.
It's the industry standard. Bethany Kazmarek has joined us. I don't know if she's been here the whole time, but she's weighed in here with a question that's pertaining to what you say. She says, how easy is it to use Scrivener with a V, by the way, to answer Molly Jo's question? It's Scrivener, Scrivner. how easy is it to use Scrivener when you're working with an editor who uses track changes in Word? I'm asking because it sounds glorious, but .doc and .docx are standard for the industry, and I happen to know you work well with an editor using Word track changes. That would be her, by the way, in case you didn't figure that out. Do you find it tedious to go back and forth, and is there a point you reach where you stick primarily to one or the other? Yeah, when I write the end of draft 1, that's when I compile it into a Word document. Just the text. I don't do all the, the character profiles and the research of this and that. I don't do any of that. Just the document itself. I'll compile that into a Word document, and from that point forward, I only use Word. I don't go back and forth. It's all Scrivener until it becomes Word, and then it stays Word. That's how I handle it. And that way, I'm familiar enough with Word that I can track changes. I can, track all your wonderful sarcasm and wit and snark in your comments, and that bring me great joy. Through Word, and that's fantastic, and we can do it that way. So that's kind of how I handle it. I do use it. She asks if we've used it for PC. That's how I've only used it for PC. I've not used it for Mac. But from what I understand, it's fairly. I think it's almost the same experience cross-platform. From what I understand, you're going to get the same experience on a Mac that you're going to get on a PC with this software. From what I understand, Pops, have you used it on Apple?
Yeah, that's all I have now. Our Apple product, and it started with Apple. It started with the Mac, and then went into PC, and they've been expanding from that. So, and now I want to weigh in on that question. Yeah, at some point you're going to go into a Word doc. By the time you get to editing, you don't want to be working in Scrivener. You got to have the same document going back and forth with the editor, and that's going to be probably Microsoft Word. I've done a couple of books in Pages that has track changes, and they would send it to me in Word, and my Pages would open it and then back and forth. But that got a little iffy for me, so I now just use Word.
Yeah.
But for track changes, you want to do that because that's a big deal now.
Word has really made it very easy to collaborate on documents, on a single document, to track changes back and forth, and to see the revisions that were made and by whom and when and all of that good stuff. I don't think there's any reason to do anything other than that. So again, Scrivener's great for creation, but once you're on the end where you're getting it edited, that needs to be compiled into a Word document. So yeah, absolutely. So we've got all that. Got some good dialogue here. Molly Joe is insisting that I not treat you in such a terrible way, making cracks about you having a big head. It's almost as if she doesn't know us.
She is an insightful person, so yeah.
She might also be, kissing up a little bit. I don't know. Trying to butter you up a little bit. So, but. For good reason, right? For good reason. Yeah. Let's see, what else do we have here? Wow. So Molly Jo wants Scrivener to be Scribner, like scribe or scribble. So, other than that, I think I've said what I would like to say about digital binders and analog binders. Are there any other tidbits of wisdom that you'd like to add?
Not really. I think we've covered it. The key is to have something, whatever works for you. It doesn't have to be any of the things we suggested, but it's some way you have to be able to access the information you learn to make your book hold together, to keep the facts, to keep the thinking. And the beauty of it is a lot of creativity goes into just researching, scribbling stuff down. So if you want to do it on paper in a 3-ring binder, great. If you want to do the digital route, that's great too. Because you've got to do something to keep you on track and to help you avoid some of the errors that creep in for all of us.
I really agree with that. I think the consistency, just for the sake of consistency, whatever time you invest in creating these documents, you're going to save on the back end. You're not going to have to go back through and search through and find all these consistency mistakes that you've made. it'll be right there kind of at your fingertips, and you'll be able to access it readily and quickly, and avoid making mistakes in continuity, etc., as you go. So it's a very valuable tool and a resource to have these things kind of assembled. Lots of different ways to do it. No one way is correct, but you do want to make sure that all your relevant information, specifically about characters and locations and setting and any pictures that you're using for reference, all of that should be someplace that you can access it, someplace you know where it is, someplace you can get to quickly and efficiently. So, any last words of wisdoms before we sign off, Pops?
Not at all. I think the other thing we would let people know is I believe our next one is supposed to be, our next get-together is supposed to be putting romance in. There may be a change in the next week or two. I just interviewed Thomas Locke. Most of us know him better as T. Davis Bunn. Very well-known writer, 7 million books in print, and he has just released a fantasy book.
Hooray!
Yeah, which is not what he's not known for that. He's known for political thrillers and suspense books, and then another genre that he's in. But his new book is out, and I think he's willing to come on and chat with us for a bit, and we might maybe do something about fantasy and sci-fi, or his writer's journey. Fascinating guy, very intelligent. Started off in international banking. He wrote 7 books before his first one sold, and then his first one became an international bestseller. But he had 7 that didn't make it, and then the 8th just went nuts, and he's been at it ever since. So
persistence matters. Yeah, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to being able to have him on the show and talk with him specifically about fantasy and sci-fi. And when you're doing fantasy and sci-fi, super important to have your research binders, right? And we could probably get a couple different podcasts from him. Maybe one on the writer's journey, and then one on specifically speculative fiction, etc. That could be a lot of fun. So yeah, we'll keep you posted on that. Like you say, next week is the before Valentine's Day, the Wednesday before Valentine's Day. So we're going to talk a little bit about love and romance, and maybe we'll do it by candlelight, which would be kind of creepy and weird.
Oh, you need to tune in just to see us make a hash of that. That's
yeah, yeah. Oh man, I think my favorite writer in terms of romance has got to be Clive Cussler. He just really knows how to handle the subtlety of a relationship between a man and a woman.
That's sarcasm, folks.
Yeah, that's sarcasm. So, well, excellent.
Good writer, though. Good writer.
Yeah, good writer. Maybe not so much in romance, but so Pops, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Probably the best thing to do is just go to altongansky.com, and from there you can see the Writers Talk podcast. You can bridge over to the Writers Conference, the Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference. You can see whatever else I'm doing. I'm getting ready to reactivate all that, get that website up and moving better than it has. I've been doing other website stuff and podcasting and the like. So, but that's next on my list. So that's really the best thing to do. And from there you can see all the stuff about the new books and the like.
Excellent. And you can always find me at aarongansky.com or any of your favorite social media sites. On aarongansky.com, I do have that link. If you go to my blog and you scroll down a couple entries, you'll find an entry called Drive or Short Story Drive. If you haven't had a chance to read that yet, I'd love for you guys to head over to the Aperion Review and give that a read and maybe leave a comment or two. I think that'd be fantastic. It's a great little short story. Have you had a chance to read it, Pops?
No, like I said, I was out of town since last we talked, and was in Southern California, and then doing a lot of radio interview stuff and a couple other projects. So yeah, I just haven't got a chance to do it.
Okay. Yeah, I hear excuse.
Well, hang on just a second here.
Oh yeah.
Okay, go ahead now.
Oh, I withdraw. Please put my book back up. Yeah, so it's a good little story. It's 3 pages or something. Yeah, so there's that, aarongansky.com. And thank you all for listening. Appreciate you being here and joining our conversation. And until next week, good writing.